Uh, Today we're going to talk about N8N, which is an automation platform. Is really where it's what it's famous for. But I like to think of N8N as actually being a visual programming tool. It's just that its main use case is to automate repetitive types of processes that teams run into. And this is very close to me. I really like N8N. I'll share with you some workflows that we put together at Chingu. I'm guessing that we have, pardon me, I haven't counted them, but I suspect we have around 40 workflows that run as part of our N8N configuration. So let's just dive right in. Andres, if you see any questions, would you do me a favor and let me know? I'm going to concentrate on the slides so I can advance them.
For sure, I will.
Yeah, thank you.
I will monitor the chat.
Yeah. So so again, what is N8N? Well, it's an open source application. Now, there is a free open source version of it, but there is also a chargeable version of it, and that's the model that we see quite a bit in the open source world today. But what it does is it's a visual programming tool, but it also has a lot of intelligence built into it. I shouldn't say intelligence, but a lot of awareness about other SaaS tools like Airtable, for example, or OpenAI, what's some others? I believe there's a Loom connector as well. So basically, it has this awareness built in, so you don't have to write code to make an API call to pull data or to operate on data that lives in some other SaaS tool. And where we see this used is, it's not just for developers. Product owners can define, or I guess their role is basically to help define what's the automation requirements for a given project that they're working on. Scrum masters can use it to automate, stand-ups and reports. Developers obviously can use it for what we used to call back office types of processes. It's those processes that you have to run every day that don't require a user at the other, on a terminal at the other end of the wire. If we go into banking, things like actually processing transactions or auditing transactions. Those are good examples of what we call batch types of functions, where you want to perform a function on a lot of different units of data, within the same interval. And then finally, UI UX designers, they can help, or they can use it to help prototype, workflows and tests and whatnot. So let's switch over. I'm going to change screens to actually show you a simple workflow, because the words don't do it justice. So let's flip over to workflows. So this is the Chingu configuration. It's a configuration we've built around our N8N implementation. So we have these folders at the top we use to organize, our workflows based upon what type of work are they doing. For example, when you submit a solo project, there's a workflow that gets invoked that automatically emails the acknowledgement that, hey, thanks for submitting, your solo project. This is what that looks like. It's essentially it's a series of nodes that can loop, but they're run in sequence to do specific things. So again, I like to view this as, or to describe this as, visual programming. So what happens, we have a webhook that when a row, I guess I need to step back. In Airtable, the solo project sign-up form is actually an Airtable form. Whenever someone submits that form, a new row is created in a solo projects table in Airtable. So we have this webhook that whenever a new row is inserted into that table, it retrieves that row from Airtable, and it does it through this node, this predefined node that's supplied by N8N, that basically knows how to perform a specific Airtable function. In this case, we're retrieving a record, and we're saying that record ID has to have a specific value. And I do need to step back because of the way webhooks work. When a row is added to our solo projects table in Airtable, the webhook is given the unique record ID of that new row. It's basically, that's what this is referencing. It's using that record ID that was provided to the webhook. And then once we've got that, it retrieves the Chingu application record for that particular individual because there's information we need from it. We can then we've got a little magic that goes on here. Chingus unfortunately can submit multiple application records. So we do periodically, one of our other functions is to basically prune out all but actually they don't prune. We merge all of the different application records that may have come in for the same individual into a single record, but that runs once a day. So what this does is it always retrieves the first application record if there are multiples. So you can see that's an edge case. And so N8N is able to handle those kinds of edge cases. The next thing it does is it's getting the most recent voyage name. It's basically the voyage that's coming up, not the current one. And then it uses another node. This one's specifically for Mailjet, which is the email SaaS service that Chingu uses to do all of our emailing. It basically invokes it to customize a template email and send it to that person that just submitted the solo project. And we can provide, there's some variables here. We supply that template email over on the Mailjet side with the first name of the person. So we're personalizing the email. And then once the email, we know that it's been successful, we actually update the solo project record in Airtable for that individual to indicate, hey, they have submitted a solo project and we acknowledged it with an email. And that prevents us from sending the same email over and over and over and over again. So that's really a quick introduction to Airtable, a visual introduction. You can see, this is what it looks like and what it does. And to create nodes, you just hit the plus and you select what type of node you want. We could insert ifs, we could do looping, we can do sorting, we can do merging. It has quite a number of powerful capabilities. So any questions up to this point? Okay, let's go back to the slides then. And we'll come back to Airtable or to our Airtable instance in just a moment as well. Go up. Here comes someone once in. So that's a quick overview of what Airtable actually looks like, what a workflow looks like. So this is a list of some key node types in Airtable. These are essentially little units of functionality that you can insert into your workflow, and you can customize them. You can tailor them to look at specific data or to operate in a certain way. So one that we use a lot is this schedule and cron. At Chingu, if you submit a Voyage sign-up request, and you've got, let's say you've got a bad email that you specified, and we can't match that to a solo project or to your Chingu application form, basically every day we have a process that runs at, I think it runs at like 1 a.m. Chicago time. And what it does is it looks for those mismatches. And when it sees, hey, here's a solo or a Voyage sign-up request that we can't match with a solo project and or an application form, it sends out an email notification to that person saying, hey, we haven't been able to find your application or your solo project. Please open a ticket so we can work with you to resolve this. And that's another edge case that really hits us hard, that we hit, weekly, several times a week actually, because everyone has multiple email addresses. And unfortunately at Chingu, your email address is what we use as our primary key in all of our tables. It's not listed here, but one that we also use very heavily, you can see there's Slack. There's also a series of nodes for Discord that we use heavily. An example of a workflow that we've written that interfaces with Discord, we have one that actually reads all of the members of Discord who have the Voyager role. This happens daily. And if a Voyage is in session, it basically makes sure that everyone that's in the Voyage has been assigned the Voyager role. And if someone has the Voyager role that's not in the current Voyage, then that it removes that role from them. And that's actually quite an involved workflow. And in fact, I think I'm going to switch back over and show you, because that's a little more interesting than just looking at a slide. So let's flip back over again. And I'll show you what that looks like. So if I go down to our Voyage folder, assign Voyager role, you can see there's a lot of nodes in this particular workflow. Better make this a little larger. So one of the things it starts out is it sets some variables, things like, are we running in production mode or test mode? What's our unique Discord guild ID for the Chingu or the Chingu server? Those get used by all of the following nodes, or many of the following nodes. This is interesting. Actually, two other nodes that are interesting. This first one, get current Voyage info. If we open it up, what we'll see is this is actually invoking what amounts to a function. Okay. So this get current Voyage info is a shared function that we've created. It's used by a lot of different workflows. So if I go to our shared folder and I look at get looking for get Voyage. Here we go, get voyage name. If we look at this one, what it's doing is we have a table, an Airtable again, that contains the start and end dates and the start and end dates for every sprint in every voyage and every voyage XP session. So what it's doing is it's retrieving that data, those rows, and then it's selecting only the voyages, and it's making sure that test voyages aren't included. And then it's got a little magic. It finds the voyage that's currently underway. And so it's doing that with really just a simple date comparison. You know, the start date of the voyage has to be either before or equal to the current date. And the end date of the voyage record we're processing has to be less than or equal to the end date of the voyage record we're processing. Because the schedules table, it's reading all of the rows in that table. Now, something you may notice, this is a little subtle, but I think it's a pretty powerful part of N8N. I could certainly have used a loop node, and I'll show you one in a minute that cycles through and individually processes each row as a series of nodes. But for something like this, I don't have to do that. What this node does, let's say there's 40 voyage schedule records that come across. What this one node does is it processes each one of those until it finds a match. And when it finds a match, a true, then it selects the current voyage. If it cycles through those and it finds there's no voyage that's currently underway, it selects the next voyage. So again, that's pretty powerful because you don't have to code a loop. You know, it's implicit in N8N. And that could be a source of a lot of confusion as well. So let's go back. And I think I was what was I on? The assigned voyager role, I think. Yeah. I wanted to show you one more thing in this one. The other thing about Chingu you may or may not have noticed that we always use ISO dates. So an ISO date is a date that's formatted as a 4-digit year, a dash, a 2-digit month, a dash, and a 2-digit day number. And the reason we use that format is because different parts of the world format calendar dates differently. You know, in the US, it's MMDDYY for month, day, and year. Well, if you go to Germany, it's actually DDMMYY, I think. You know, they format with the month being before the day. And there's probably other variations as well. So the ISO date format is a standard, and we use it because number one, it's a common format that's easy to understand. The second reason, which is probably more importantly, is when you're sorting by date, it always ensures you that whether you're sorting descending or ascending, the dates will be in the correct order. You know, if you're sorting by a date that's say day, month, and year, you know, you'd have to do some reformatting to get the dates sorted in the right order because you'd be sorting on day first. All right, so this node is an example. To do that formatting into ISO, we actually have a node that contains some JavaScript. And it's just a little fragment of JavaScript that takes the input from the prior node and converts it to an ISO string. So any questions? I realize I've been going kind of quick here. Again, this is a pretty involved workflow. And it has some sub workflows. That's these red ones with the arrow that are quite involved as well. So this is one of actually our most complex workflows. So if there's no questions, I'll go back to the slides. I will make these, oops, sorry. I will make these, the slide deck available to you when I publish the link to the video. That'll either be tonight or tomorrow in the Pound Announcements channel. Now, one other node I'll talk about that's important is this HTTP request. Is if you find in N8N that there's a SaaS service that you're using that N8N knows nothing about, you can always fall back to just doing a REST call or calling an API route that service makes available. You can invoke that through a HTTP request, just a simple REST. And I don't know if there is GraphQL support in N8N. I haven't used that, and I'll have to look at that. So any questions? Chingu, the reason GraphQL popped into my head, another little bit of trivia, is GitHub actually has a GraphQL API. It has both a REST API and a GraphQL API. Everything you can do in the GraphQL API, you can do in the REST API, but it's not true going the other way. There are some HTTP functionality or routes that haven't been implemented in GraphQL. So we actually used to use some of those GraphQL functions, and we've abandoned those and are using just the REST API just to be consistent in our own back-end code. We have some bots that they retrieve, actually they update information in GitHub as well. All right, this is really a kind of a simplified version of one of the workflows I showed earlier. This is not a workflow that Chingu has implemented. This is one that was created just for, or included just as an example. But it's very similar. It's a workflow that it starts with a webhook that gets invoked when a form is submitted. You've got some code that does some processing against the fields that come in from that form. You can then update a spreadsheet. Then you could invoke Slack to send an acknowledgement back to the person that submitted that form, as well as send an email to that individual as well. So again, N8N is not something you would use for, real-time processing like you do when you have a user at a terminal. It's not for that. It's for batch functionality and automation functionality. This is just another example of a Chingu, actually, N8N workflow. We have one that prior to a voyage, it runs to validate to make sure that the GitHub names that Voyager signed up with are actually valid, that GitHub knows about those names. It never fails. I actually had one today. I had a late addition to Voyage 61. This person in their Voyage sign-up form gave us a GitHub name, but it wasn't their GitHub name. They had forgotten a character on the end of their name. So anyway, this workflow was created to validate all those GitHub names so that we can correct them in the void sign-up form before we start granting access to GitHub repos in a void. So again, any questions or anything at all? As you can tell, I'm really positive about N8N. I really like it a lot, and it has a lot of the things that we do, that the administrative tasks at Chingu, a lot of them we had to do manually, and since we've moved to N8N, we don't. There's very little that we do manually anymore. It's all handled by N8N. You guys are way too quiet. I'm going to check the chat real quick. Nope, nothing there. Good.
So what advantages do you have versus a regular batch process that you can code in any language?
Yeah, there are two. One is minor, and one is major. The major one is I found it easier to identify these common functionalities or common functions that are required by different bits of automation. And in N8N, it's been easier for me to number one, identify them, and then to create a shared workflow that multiple different other workflows, use. Kind of like, again, like a function. The other advantage is if you notice that in this workflow, I've got these comment blocks. So N8N, if you do these comment blocks correctly, it can actually be self-documenting in a lot of ways. We found that a lot of our internal documentation really just references the N8N workflow. Because it's visual, it's fairly easy to just look at it to see what is it that it's doing. Now, again, that assumes that you've done commenting like we've done here. So an example of that is we used to have a Node.js program that assigned Voyager roles. And it was quite a complex program because it had to read all the users and their roles from Discord. It had to find those with the Voyager role. It was a program that was probably, to be honest, I don't remember the length. It's probably at least 1,000 lines or more. And in N8N, because a lot of that functionality is pre-defined in these nodes, it became much faster to build it and easier to maintain it. Now,
and on test-wise, because you can create automated tests with a regular programming language to ensure everything is working correctly. How does that translate here? Does it have a test language or you have to just run it with test data?
You really, that's the negative, one of the big negatives to N8N. You have to run it with test data. And I'm going to change screens yet again to show you how I've done that. Because it's a little cumbersome. It's not hard, but it's not always straightforward either. So you'll see in this workflow, this is the one that assigns the Voyager role. I've got this node right here that says, it checks, are we running a test or are we in production mode? If we're in test mode, then it's pulling a specific void schedule. V99 is our test void that we use in Chingu. So it has to have this special logic to make sure that it's grabbing the test void versus a production void. So it's the other thing that N8N doesn't have is, like jest functionality, something where you can you can pre-program a set of tests or assertions to run to check the validity of the workflow. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that out. I forgot about it. That is a big negative. That's the biggest one.
And the debugging wise.
Debugging wise isn't too bad. You see this execution tab. Number one, I should go back. I have the ability to set a generic trap, if you will, or a generic try over the entire workflow that will send an email to the admin team if there's an error. Okay. The other thing I can do, and I think I've done it here. Yeah, at this particular point, when we try and add the Voyager role to a user, if there's an error, we have a custom error node that we've written that sends some more specific data about that error. It emails it to the admin team. Now, in production, debugging, something that helps is this executions tab. If you click on it, you not only see these are all of the executions, but in a minute you'll see it's going to pull up the actual workflow that ran at, what was that, on June the 10th at 1 a.m. And if I click on one of these nodes, I have to be careful because these nodes might have email addresses in them. Let's do this one. If I click on this node, it shows me the actual data from that particular run of this workflow. So that's helpful if at 1 a.m. in the morning a workflow fails. When one of us wakes up the next day and we see the email for that failure, we run to N8N and we pull up this executions tab to see, what was the data that caused that particular error, or what data was involved when the error occurred. That would be a little more precise.
Well, so then you don't have a debug mode. You just run and see if the data you're expecting, visually see if the data you're expecting is the data you're getting in each node. You cannot trace or go step by step looking what's happening, where an error occurs. So you just have to run it and hope for the best and make it changes accordingly.
Yeah, that really is very true. What it means is what I've done is when I create a workflow, I'm very careful about choosing the data and the edge cases to test against, because I don't have any kind of interactive debugging. I have to run it and see did it fail or not.
So that's another negative on my book, at least.
Yeah.
That you cannot debug while you code. Because some errors are easier to find when debugging that rather than just looking at the data.
Yeah, the answer to that, I mean, that's true. That is easier in a traditional program. One of the things we can do, though, is in settings, I can set this error workflow. Now, our error workflow is very generic. All it does is it emails, it takes the input stream and emails it to an admin and says, oh, this node workflow failed in this particular node. This workflow, though, could have multiple different nodes itself. So it could get fairly involved. It could even, if we wanted it to, we could code it so that we use the N8N API to get more detailed information about the particular failure that occurred. Again, we haven't done that because we just haven't needed it. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why, well, there's two reasons why N8N isn't good for a true end user application, because number one, it's not a terminal based app. It's not grabbing input from a terminal from a user sitting there typing into the screen. It's processing batches of data. Okay. So it's more like a Node.js, like a cron Node.js program than anything else.
So with all the scale implications, something like this would be appropriate, for example, for a bank that processes interest rates at the end of the day.
Yep, exactly. Or does a transaction audit, where it's typically banks, the flow at a bank, let's say like processing credit cards, for example. You make a credit card purchase, the bank, processes that purchase, and you can actually make the purchase in real time. But then there's a set of follow-on processes that occurred to do like auditing and whatnot, to try to catch, the transaction went through and everything was okay at the point the transaction was requested, but is there other things we could look at that might identify this as being, a fraudulent transaction? That's why a hacker can use your credit card and a transaction will go through, and then 2 hours later, your bank calls you to say, the fraud department calls you to say, hey, we've noticed this transaction activity. Was this really you that made this purchase? And again, Chingu is a good example because there's a lot of form-based processing that goes on. People are submitting solo projects. They're submitting signups for voyages. They're submitting their application to join Chingu. A lot of the cross-checking that we do is not done in real time. It's done overnight. So yeah, let's go back. We got about 20 minutes. Let me switch screens again. Like I said, I don't want to really bore you with slides. Again, we've talked about this. There are 400 pre-built-in integrations to other services like Slack and Discord and Salesforce is a big one. Shopify is a really big one. So you can use these built-in integrations, and you can tailor them with different options that are provided to fit your needs. But you can also include JavaScript. And as you saw, as I showed you earlier, we do that a little bit in our workflows. There also is a case I've seen where I would just say that the Discord API is interesting. There are some pre-built-in Discord functions in N8N that we've noticed it's actually easier to just code the HTTP REST calls as HTTP nodes in N8N because there's just a lot of and it's more on the Discord side, I think, but it's just the Discord nodes are just, you think they should work and they don't for some of them. So I haven't used this. I actually am working on this now for a new workflow to leverage some AI. But there is N8N has nodes to help you interface with things like Gemini and OpenAI and whatnot. I'm afraid I just don't know a lot about them yet. I'm still working through that. So how do you run N8N? So we run it self-hosted at Chingu. Railway is our hosting service that we rely on. And in fact, I'm going to change screens yet again, and I'll show you the N8N instance in our railway. So this is everything that runs in Chingu's railway. We've got quite a few little things running, but you'll notice this Chingu N8N. This instance is actually, there's a primary server, there's a worker. This is all supplied by N8N. It's a canned integration for railway. But then the instance also, all the data is operated on in Postgres, a combination of Postgres and Redis. And this is something, again, it's a service, if you will, that someone else wrote the packaging for this, and we were able to use it to deploy it to our railway instance. Now, we do this because we're very cost conscious. And this costs us to run this for a month, and we have quite a few transactions that are running in this. I think our entire railway bill for last month was like $25. So for this, plus everything else we're running in railway. So it's not a lot. Oh, you had to drop. No worries. So now I'm going to flip it back. Pardon me. See, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, yeah, the slide. We're back to the slide deck.
Yep.
So if you're just starting out and you want to learn about N8N, there is an N8N cloud service. There is a starter. There's a I shouldn't say free. There is a starter version that costs 24 euros a month. That'd probably be around 30 US dollars. And then they have higher. They have a pro and an enterprise and all. So, it's all, they take care of all the hosting. Everything is on their side. That's one way to experiment. I believe there is a free tier of N8N as well. I don't recall if it's free forever or if it's like free for 2 weeks or whatever. But you have those options. I will say for railway, at least, it was really simple to set it up. We did it in just a couple hours. I don't think I'm going to go through all of this, but in your team, there are certain things that N8N would be good for, regardless of what role you fill. But I'd say more generically, I would look at it for when you're developing an app, and that app has some type of bulk transaction processing that has to occur. That's really the use case that N8N works best in. And to compare it with like a Zapier or a Make, I have to admit, I am not a fan of Zapier at all. I found N8N much simpler to use than Zapier. But the bottom line of this slide is you have more flexibility in N8N than you do in Zapier or Make. And then finally, if you're looking at N8N, if you think you have an application for it, your first step is try it in the cloud for free, and then self-host it with a Docker or on Railway. And then they also have a very good community site where people have contributed their workflows. So, you may find that a workflow you need has already been implemented by someone else and they've shared it. That's how we started out with our initial workflows, by the way. And then kind of to summarize, this is open source workflow automation. There are are these 5 different types of nodes, but there are, I think it's 40 different nodes altogether that give you the capability to do triggering and conditional logic and looping and whatnot, as well as native code. It is a visual programming tool, so it's a drag and drop. It's got lots of integrations to other popular SaaS services. It's got these 70 AI nodes to really let you connect and leverage the leaders in the AI space. And then the last hint is always start small. Don't start with a really complex workflow. Start with something very simple. And this is going to be the last time that I will change screens, I promise. But I'm going to show you our simplest workflow, and it was one of our first workflows. Here we go. If I go back to our community, every morning you may notice that we post a welcome that welcomes Chingus to the new day in I don't know, it's probably 25 or 30 different languages. We used to copy that out of a file, a Google Doc file, and paste it every morning. Somebody in the admin team had to do that copy paste. We set this up in N8N to kick off at 6 a.m. Chicago time every day. That's what this days between triggers is all about. So it's a cron task. And then this is a canned Discord node provided by N8N. We just customized it with the message that we want to send. And so this will look very familiar, or should look familiar. That's that message that occurs every day in the community chat. Let's see, was there a question? Oh, somebody meaning Jim, you know. Yeah, so that's all I had for today. Any questions or comments or feedback, anything at all? I think that was a good discussion, some good points that Andres raised, that just as with any tool, you know, there are pros and cons. So there's what we call a sweet spot. You know, there are use cases that N8N is very good at, but there's also some things that it should not be used for. And one example at Chingu is we have a bot called Seshat bot. Seshat is the Egyptian goddess of mathematics and statistics and metrics and whatnot, of science. Our Seshat bot runs every day. It examines all of the Voyage team channels, and it doesn't look at the content of messages, but it counts how many messages have been posted by everyone in a team. And then it updates Airtable for every team member with the number of messages they've posted in each sprint. So it's a running count for each sprint. And we rely on that quite heavily to determine who's active, who's not active. You know, if you go an entire sprint without posting, we use that metric to determine who is eligible to be removed from the Voyage because they're not participating. That Seshat bot also does the same thing for GitHub repo metrics. It counts your commits to the main branch, your commits to non-main branches. It even determines, have you joined your GitHub team yet? And we have an N8N workflow that reads that metric out of, or when it's posted to Airtable, and it'll send you an email when you're in a Voyage if it sees you haven't joined your Voyage team in GitHub. So again, that's an example. That's a very complicated bit of code, and it's something that would be more complex to implement in N8N, and it wouldn't be nearly as readable as what it is as a Node.js program.
Those N8N Interactive, for example, is good option for a backup system, or is it too simple, the backup system, to put it on N8N?
You know, it really depends. I'd say for most, well, I'd say for any database that has a backup function built into it, I think it would be very useful. So Postgres, I believe it has like a PG_backup function. Yeah, that's something that you could schedule or create a workflow that triggers to run, every, at 2 a.m. every morning, for example, to take your backup. It could do that.
But the backup will be saved. You can save it locally?
Yeah. Yeah, you could probably, for that, you'd want to save it in like a Google Drive or some other file storage system.
Okay.
N8N would not be, I have not tried to save something in a local file system. I don't think it will let you do that. But in fact, I have an app, a workflow that updates information in a Google Sheets, a Google spreadsheet. But again, you could also just store it as a file in Google Doc.
And security-wise, are there any major flags that you found, or?
I have not. I have found that N8N is very good. Just last week, there were some 0-day things that they noticed, and they put out fixes immediately. I say immediately. They put them out in the same day they noticed them, and fixes are really easy to install. All we have to do is restart our server, and that installs the fixes. Now, having said that, N8N is not going to protect you from any security flaws in like Discord. In this particular Discord node, in the Discord function that it's invoking, if there's any flaw or exposure in that function as provided by Discord, it's not going to protect you from that.
Makes sense that.
Yeah. But I haven't found anything that's concerned me about N8N itself. Not yet. Something will come up. I'm sure of it. It always does.
There's always something,
Yep.
but you have to outweigh the gravity of that bug versus the benefits.
Right. Yeah, and that's one reason that we this may be kind of false logic, but it's one reason we like self-hosting at Chingu, because our hosting service, we use two-factor authentication. We feel pretty good that we've done everything we can to secure that railway system, and because we're not co-hosting, that's maybe a bad word, but if we were using railways, their cloud system, I don't know how they're architected, but a lot of those cloud systems, there might be, a single kind of database architecture, and your data lives in the same database as some other company's data. That's that co-location kind of thing. And we're not adverse to that, but because the cost turned out to be cheaper for us to self-host, we like that better, because then we have full control over the data. I used to work in way back in the 80s and early 90s in military applications for the U.S. And we actually had rules that our data for the branches of the Navy and the Air Force that I worked with, our data could not be co-hosted with anyone else's data. So something like a S3 or whatever was not an option for us. Had it been around then. So good questions. Any other questions? You came at the right time, Val. We're closing it up.
Nice. But I guess there's gonna be the recording, right?
That's right. There'll be the recording, and when I post the recording, I'll also post a copy of the slides.
Oh, nice. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm interested to watch it later.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Then. So any other questions? I guess, Alex, anything you have? I know we went pretty quick through this today.
Yeah, I mean, like, I did have a couple on the way, and then a minute later you answered it. So I guess I don't have any outstanding questions.
So you're saying I'm clairvoyant?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But you were talking, and then one of your other instances here answered it.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. So, all right. So, I guess we'll close this one out. Val, when the recording comes out, if you have any questions, feel free to ping me, and I'll help out.
Thank you.
But yeah, the recording will be available. It'll probably be tomorrow morning is when I'll post it. But that's it. Andres, thanks for hosting these. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim, for preparing this. This talk was very interesting.
Oh, no worries.
Well, if nobody has any more questions, we will close this today.
All righty. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone. Talk to you later.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh.